Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Now, you know this thing that conservatives say where they say, America hasn't declared war since World War II. They just use AUMFs, or Authorization for the Use of Military Force, right? So they can circumvent Congress in order to get a war without declaring war like the Constitution says they must. So basically, I wanted to do the research for that and then bring that to you like, hey, that's a true thing. Yeah, it's not. It's really not. It's not what you think it is. And it's really interesting to see that, like, just conservative people, I don't want to name anybody in particular who talk about this. They just have no idea what they're talking about, but they're kind of correct in a completely incorrect way. Let me show you. Now, got a reference below. It's from military.com, and they are writing this article based on this thing from the CRS, which is the Congressional Research Services. And so this is a report, and there's a link in the reference below to the report, but I didn't give you that link because it said there was a security issue with my computer, and so I just backed out of it. But anyways, so what is an authorization for the use of military force? I'm just going to say AUMF from now on, right? The authorization for use of military force is a joint resolution by Congress that gives the U.S. president the authority to leverage military force in a conflict. Such authorizations carry instructions regarding which region, what nation, or even specific individuals the force can be used against. They may require reports to Congress or carry other specific parameters. So see, the argument the conservative view is we're doing all these illegal wars because we're not declaring war because only Congress can declare war. But this takes a joint resolution of Congress. So both a declaration of war and an AUMF require joint resolution of Congress, which nobody knows that, who you're listening to. And I didn't know that before I researched it, so I'm not giving them too hard of a time. But basically, it's very narrow, the AUMF. Such authorizations carry instructions regarding which region, what nation, or even specific individuals the force can be used against, and they have to report back to Congress, right? So let's contrast that with the declaration of war. Also granted by Congress, a declaration of war triggers a, quote, state of war under international law, end quote, the CRS report says. It gives the okay for, quote, the killing of enemy combatants, the seizure of enemy property, and the apprehension of enemy aliens, end quote. That's not a trigger created by an AUMF. Although the report says the rules of the Hague and Geneva Conventions apply to all armed conflicts, regardless of whether war has officially been declared. So you see how broad a declaration of war is. You could just go take their stuff. I mean, seizure of enemy property, right? And under the AUMF, you're confined to, okay, so this sounds great, right? Like, wow, they're doing AUMFs instead of war. That's way better, right? Okay, so this is where you're gonna get to the point where the conservative pundits who don't know anything about this are actually correct, because we're gonna look at 2001 and 2002, the AUMF's done there, and we're gonna see how AUMF's gone wrong, basically, right? So, okay. Actually, first we're gonna talk about how many times they've declared war and when it started. So Congress has passed declarations of war 11 times since America's founding. The first declaration of war was formalized the War of 1812. The most recent declaration of war was passed in response to the 1941 attacks on Pearl Harbor and formalized America's entrance into World War II. Congress has used the AUMF instead of a declaration of war 11 times, according to the report. The first such AUMF was passed in 1798 in response to the French seizure of American ships on the high seas. That AUMF allowed the U.S. Navy and U.S. privateers to defend those vessels, retake any captured U.S. ships, and capture any armed French vessels. Okay, this part's interesting because, look, 1798 was the first AUMF, and the first declaration of war was 1812. That's pretty interesting because basically people talk about AUMFs as if this is a post-World War II change in order to lower the requirements to actually engage in battle, without a declaration of war. It's not that at all. So now let's go to 2001. The 2001 authorization for use of military force is an AUMF granted by Congress at the request of President George W. Bush in response to the September 11th attacks on the U.S. Past September 18, 2001, the 2001 authorization for use of military force remains in effect and gives the president the authority to, quote, use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attack that occurred on 9/11, or harbored such organizations or persons. It also says the president can use force through the AUMF to prevent any future acts of international terrorism against the United States by such nations, organizations, or persons. So you see how this has gone terribly all of a sudden. The idea of an AUMF as opposed to a declaration of war, depending on the circumstances, is not bad. It could be quite positive just to narrow the conflict, right? But then if you actually get an AUMF, see, like, declaration of war has to be against a country. So now they've perverted the AUMF and used it so it's just all the nations, organizations, or persons that the president thinks might have been involved, and even to prevent such future things, which is why you see something like when Trump bombed Soleimani in the Iraq airport. So he was the third most important Iranian, and it's like, well, you can't just drop a bomb in Iraq. That's a sovereign country, right? They got a 2001 AUMF, right? So the 2001 authorization for use of military force has been used by administrations since September 11 as the basis for ongoing actions of combat terrorism, right? Which I just talked about. Now let's go to 2002. The AUMF against Iraq resolution of 2002, also known as the Iraq resolution, was a joint resolution passed by Congress allowing what would become known as Operation Iraqi Freedom, requested by President George W. Bush in response to aggression, the support of terrorism from Saddam Hussein's Iraq government, and purported weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The resolution passed Congress in October 2002. Yeah, so the WMDs, and Iraq was being aggressive against the United States directly. Okay. So the Iraq resolution granted the president the use of force to, quote, defend the national security of the United States against the continuing threat posed by Iraq. Let me read that again. Defend the national security of Israel against the continuing threat posed by Iraq. That's what they actually mean, because there was the direct threat to the United States. Let me go on. And enforce all relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions regarding Iraq. According to the resolution, it was the basis for the war in Iraq, which is seen as ending in 2011 with the full withdrawal of combat troops. However, as of 2023, about 2,000 U.S. troops remain in Iraq, serving as advisors or training Iraqi forces. Okay, do you see how this went terribly wrong here? So the idea of AUMF is not fundamentally bad to narrow the conflict. But if you pass a ludicrously broad, like, all the nations who are hurting trade with the United States, like, you could attack anybody you want, and just, anyways. So I thought this was very interesting. Basically, I didn't know that it required a joint resolution of Congress, which is insane because people are acting like they're just doing this without congressional approval. That's what they're acting like. And so I do like AUMFs in a certain situation. Well, let's not do any war at all. But if you had to do a conflict, AUMF seems better than a declaration of war. But then you see how it could go terribly wrong with the 2001, 2002 AUMFs. So I thought it was pretty interesting. It's good to know what's really going on and not just listen to, because I was even repeating this to you guys, because I just hadn't researched it. Like, nobody goes and looks into these things. They just repeat it like I was doing. And now I have brought this to you guys' attention. So basically, okay, you remember when I did that episode with Victor and it was called Border Patrol for Treason? And we made the case that they're betrayed the United States of America, like full treason to giving aid to foreigners. Anyways, so on Wednesday, I want to do one, and it's going to be called Secret Service for Treason. And so I filmed this in advance. So today's the 14th. So yesterday, Trump just got shot in the air. It's not going to involve that because I'm going to focus on JFK, RFK, and RFK Jr., right? And we're going to see, I'm going to even show you the video. It's terrible. And then on Thursday, we're going to talk about multiculturalism leads to treason, kind of a theme going on here. So anyways, hit the like and subscribe. Hope to see you next time.